Hi, it's Jen from Shabby Fabrics. Welcome to a brand new series. This is Foundation Paper Piecing Series 3. I cannot believe this is now our third year of foundation paper piecing. We kicked this off, obviously, a couple years back with our very first series. I was reluctant to actually do the videos, not sure if there was enough people interested in this facet of quilting, and boy, was I surprised. People loved it. People who have been maybe dragging their feet like I used to about foundation paper piecing fell in love with this amazing facet. So if you have been on the fence, let that stop and stay with me. We're going to be here a while because I'm going to unpack what I used to find very confusing. And I'm going to make this so easy. So even if you are not an experienced quilter, maybe you've never done foundation paper piecing before, I'm going to show you exactly how to do it. And you'll be amazed that even beginners can be successful on their very first project. So as I said, this is the third in a series. On the first two series, our projects were about 12 inches. And they were able to be displayed on a craft stand or on a wall display from Ackfelt. On series 3 and the number 3, we thought maybe 3 means we should do 3 motifs. And we've also given you an option. You can either display the project on an 8-inch Ackfelt hanger, which is lovely, or another type of hanger you might have. And we'll talk about building the hanging sleeve on the back of the project if you are planning to display yours vertically on a wall. Or maybe you have a special entryway table like I do by my front door, and I like to display something different for each month. If that's you with the same kit, not a different kit, you would simply have a horizontal presentation and the process is the same. So I love that with this series, Series 3, there's 3 motifs, and we give you some options for display. So kits, of course, are the way to go. We put our absolute whole heart into our kits. In fact, I'm going to tell you something that we originally came up with a coloring. We actually made the samples. We looked at the samples and said, the colors are off, and we remade them. And so thank you to our amazing sewing team for just embracing that we have a commitment to an unrelentless pursuit of as near color perfection as we hope to achieve, so that when you make these kits, you're so proud to display them and you're getting compliment after compliment after compliment. So let's look at the project here. The same motif, top and bottom, with some beautiful fairy frost. We even have a prefused laser cut glitter applique. I mean, how fun is that, of course? And our cute little bunny with some button eyes that will also be included in your kit. When you get your kit each month, you'll of course get the original fabrics you're seeing. You'll always be getting a backing as well as your binding. The only thing extra you need to grab would be some fusible fleece, and we're loving our Cali Dell. This is just lovely, soft, and it's got a fusible component to it. Whereas we know with batting, we don't. We have to maybe even use a spray base it to adhere the layers together. On the Cali Dell, one side of that is fusible. You can iron that right to your backing fabric, use a little bit of spray base to put your top down, create your quilt sandwich, and that's where the thread set comes in. We love to sew all those layers together and give that nice embossed look. But we'll be talking about that a little bit later on. In addition to all the beautiful fabrics, the buttons, and in this case, the prefused laser cut glitter ricrac, you're getting a quality pattern that has been tested again and again. In addition to that, you are getting the foundation papers printed on that high quality premium Carol Doak foundation paper, which is the gold standard for foundation paper piecing. You don't have to run out and Xerox that, which is very typical with a lot of foundation paper piecing books. In addition to that, a customer favorite are the stickers. Our instructions are going to guide you through, okay, out of blue one, cut this size. You make that cut, you sticker that fabric right then, right there. That is one of the keys to foundation paper piecing. Let me show you what I'm talking about. We'll be doing this together here. This happens to be section C. We'll talk about what that means in just a minute. But my instructions guided me through, okay, on this fabric, cut it to this size, grab my sticker my fabric. Do that with all of your fabrics. And of course, before you start cutting, give everything a good size, a good press, and then make some nice clean cuts with a sharp blade. Get your fabrics cut to the exact size that are in your pattern, and they're also noted on your stickers, by the way. You don't have to just keep referring back to that. Once you've determined, okay, what's my blue 1? What's my blue 2? And you've identified that, and that's why we're giving you a full color pattern. So you can clearly identify which fabric is which. Once you've got everything cut and stickered, simply with your stacks of A and B and C and D, just organize them, C1, C2, C3, so you can see how mine are in sequence. That's one of the first things I learned about foundation paper piecing. Get organized. That's one of the things that helps us make less errors and just have a more enjoyable process, and it actually goes a little bit quicker. So with foundation paper piecing, of course, I don't know whether you're brand new or you're experienced. If you already know your process and you have your workflow, just head to the website and pick up this kit and your thread set and any notions you might need. But if you're brand new, this video is for you. It's going to be longer because I know when I tried to learn the first time, I was just confused and put this amazing facet of quilting aside for nearly 2 decades until someone said, Jen, let me show you how fun and easy this is. And I've been in love with foundation paper piecing ever since. So I want to make sure I give you my undivided attention and time and go into the detail needed so that if you were like me before and I was just confused, we're gonna put that aside and get absolute clarity today. That's the goal. So once we have all of our fabrics cut out, this is when we begin to look at our foundation papers. And you can see that in your kit, you have A is your egg. And of course you have another egg, but you also have, and this is the bunny portion. You can see this is kind of the face in here. And you can see in this instance, the bunny is assembled kind of in 4 different chunks. So the piece that we'll be doing today is this one right here. So when you have your foundation papers, when you're separating one section from the other, in this instance, don't cut directly on that outer line. Notice we left a margin around that. We will cut on that outermost line later on when we're just kind of squaring all of these up. So when you extract this portion, set that aside. And again, you'll give a nice margin around these and set that aside. And that's true of everything we're going to be doing in this series. So I just wanted to point that out. Now here, look at how this egg was really just in one big section. That is actually unusual. Normally it takes different sections that you put together, square up the elements, and then sew them together. So this is why I'm going to do the bunny with you, because it does involve different sections and I want you to see the process of that. So for now, I'll just put the 2 eggs aside, and we know we're going to be focusing on this element of it. And I've got the other parts done, but I want to talk you through the process, and we'll do several rounds of this. Our pattern first shows us in this instance, and this is just happened to be the perfect fabric, right? Fabric is king. When I saw this plaid, I said, okay, I wanted this to be printed on point, but it happened to be printed north, south, east, and west. But notice how the sashing has it turned. So that is one of the things that we're going to actually go through first, because I want to extract out my 2 sashing pieces, which we'll put aside. But notice the bunny's ears are the same fabric. And so we're going to cut the sashing because there are longer strips. We'll get them aside. And from the remaining, we would get our 2 pieces that we'll be using for the bunny. So I wanted to make sure I didn't skip that step, because if you just cut this fabric without cutting it on the 45, your plaid will not be unbiased. It would be straight up. And of course, it's so much cuter when it is printed on, or when it's cut on the bias, or my favorite, printed on the bias. So this is how you make a plaid that is straight up become bias if it's not and you want it to be. First thing, add sizing, because you straight away know that when you cut on the 45, bias has a lot of stretch. Stretch is not our friend, especially when we're piecing things together. We want that to be stable. That's why anytime you say bias, sizing, lots of sizing, give it a good press. And then I'm going to use my ruler, and our diagram is pointing this out here, that there is a line. And if you are using a ruler or straight edge that's not, doesn't have these lines, don't worry. The main thing is we're just kind of trying to go for the perfect 45. It just happens to be that on the Creative Grids rulers here, they have these 45-degree lines. So if you happen to have one, and this is one of our favorite rulers, if you've been waiting for a reason to get this ruler, today might be the day. It's obviously a phenomenal ruler in its own right, but it also has these lovely 45-degree lines right here that I can line up right with the bottom of my fabric. And when I look at my pattern, I see, okay, number one, I need to get my 2 sashing strips. I'm actually going to go for that first. That's that longer run, right? I can get my 2 sashing strips and then go for my B3 and my C2 with my leftover fabric. Because this longer run, looking at our sashing, we need to get 2 pieces that are 1.5 by 7.5. Now check out this ruler. See how I've also got, this is basically right on the edge of the fabric, and that's 10.25 inches. I can slide way down here. I can slide easily here, and I think I'll just start right there to make my first cut. Now, once I've established that, I'm now going to use the markings here. See how that's the 1.5? The black circles are always 1/2. Turning this around, notice how the white circles are whole numbers. When somebody explained this engineering to me of these rulers, I then understood the value of Creative Grid, in addition to the incredible grip on the back of this. I used to think a ruler is a ruler is a ruler. It's not. It's not. And I invested far too much fabric and not enough in rulers. And I've now learned my lesson that a ruler can make or break a project. So now that I have established the 45 line because of the lines on my ruler, I now have my 1.5 here, and I'm laying that right along my line, and I'm going to make my first cut, lay that right back down, and in this instance, you can see how my ruler isn't quite that distance. All I'll do, so close, I'll just go right off the edge. Look how much leftover I have to be able to cut a 1.5 by 4.5, as well as a 1.5 by 2.5. You could really do that, and probably both of those in this section, and keep that. This is so sweet. What a fun fabric to add to your stash. And of course, I would now go with my ruler, and these are 7.5. I'm just going to show you how I use my rulers. I would lay this down. Maybe I like this spot. Maybe I like that. I've got plenty of room. And I won't rotate my mat right now just because I have a lot of things on the table, but I normally would. But now look how I take my 7.5, lay that right on the end, right on my strip, and give a cut. Beautiful. An incredible ruler used for so many things. So that was one of the things I wanted to point out to you when you get your kit and you're looking at your project that's showing this plaid on point. You're like, wait, how am I going to do that? So I wanted to point that out. All right. You understand how we got to that point of having on bias plaid when that fabric wasn't printed on bias. Now we're going to start unpacking foundation paper piecing. Again, if you are experienced, There's nothing new I'm going to tell you. You already know your process. The only thing that you might be curious about would be the hanging sleeve if you are going to hang your project vertically. But beyond that, there's really no mystery here. This is for if you've never done foundation paper piecing before. It's going to sound weird. It's going to look weird. And you're thinking, how's that happen? Hang in with me, because if it sounds confusing and you're confused, that's normal until you get the rhythm of this. So the letters and the numbers, just focus on the number. C1, A1, J1, whatever that is, that's always going to be the piece that you put down first. So in this instance, we have the printing on the front and the fabric will actually be applied to the back. You're like, how's that going to work? Now, one thing that we've been reading from our customers as feedback, and I think it's very valuable to share what I've been reading from you that have been leaving us comments, and we appreciate that. All of these lines that divide C1, C2, and C2 from C3 will eventually be folded on. We like to use our add a quarter ruler, which is very much engineered for foundation paper piecing, and I would say almost exclusively for that. We historically fold that paper back on these lines this way, one by one, as we go. Some people have recommended in advance, before you even start putting your first fabric down, to go and fold and create the creases for the entire project in advance. That's your preference, whether you want to fold as we go or fold everything up front. For now, you're going to unfold it till it's flat. I generally kind of fold as I go. Does not matter, but I want to give you that option. So for the very first piece, C1, as I said, the fabric is going to go on the back. And what's our goal? Our goal every single time with foundation paper piecing, no matter how small or large the project is this fabric needs to cover what the bounding box of C1 plus a 1/4 inch all the way around that. So I would lay this fabric down and I can easily see, especially if I hold this up to the light, and if you have a light box, grab it. If I had my wafer, if I had room for a light box right now, I would lay this right down there because I could easily see that I have plenty of real estate around that C1 to have at least a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Once you have found that spot, and for that very first piece only, put a small amount of glue, and I do mean a small amount of glue, because you will be removing this. You will be. That might have been a little bit too little. You will be removing the paper later. Make sure the pretty side is face down. I'm going to put that right back on there. And let me look one more time and I'm good. The line between C1 and C2 is where we have to go next. Now here comes an acronym that is key. TSP. That's all we're going to be doing today. TSP. Trim, sew, press. So I'm going to get my iron heating up. And the first thing that we need to do is do a trim. Place the other fabric where it needs to go, C2. And then we're going to go sew and we're going to go press. I have the size 70 Microtex needle in the machine right now. That is a wonderful needle. And if you don't have one, don't let that slow you down. I've done plenty of foundation paper piecing with size 80 needles. Don't let that slow you down. It's the perfect needle, I think, and so does Miss Tammy and many of our ladies that do foundation paper piecing. It's so sharp. It really just penetrates this and almost perforates the paper. So when you get ready to remove it, it's easier. We also have a much shortened stitch length of a 1.5. 2.5 is the default on a BERNINA. We bring it way back because remember, we are going to be removing this paper and we want to add more thread in a given distance to stabilize everything before we remove that paper. But our first step of TSP is the trim. This is again where we do the add a quarter ruler, and this is going to have two functions for us. This ruler, which comes as a 2-pack. You can buy these individually in the 6 or the 12-inch or get the combo. Just get the combo. You're going to need both of these throughout the journey of the projects we're doing for Series 3. Series 1 needed both. Series 2, you only needed this size. I think just get this and get it over with, right? You're going to want to make a lot more foundation paper piecing projects. You can see from the top camera that one of the sides has a tapered edge and one has a lip. They both have a very important function. And the first function is that I'm going to lay that edge along the line between C1 and C2. And my goal is to fold that back over the top perfectly. And I just give a good crease. And this is why some people like to just fold that paper back in the beginning. So they really just, at this point, are just kind of folding it, reaffirming the fold they had already done previously. Again, your preference. Once that's folded back, we turn our outer quarter around, and now this lip is going to lock in to the fold we just created, and we trim away. This is the T of the TSP. The next thing that we need to do with our C2 is place that fabric, but you say, how? How do I do this? Well, remember the goal is always the same, that the shape of the fabric, its position, needs to cover all of C2 and 1/4 inch all the way around. So we kind of go, okay, well, that's nice, but how do I envision this? Place this right side together. I simulate flipping it over. And again, if I had a light box, I would use it. I can hold it up to studio lights and see we're in a perfect spot. Once you're in that perfect spot to cover not only all of C2, but the 1/4 inch all the way around, holding that in position, just flip it over, and we're going to pin that in place. We don't want anything to move. All right, let's talk about where we're going to sew. We know that this is the line that we're trying to sew, but we've got this section up here, but this is kind of the end of that section. So when I go to the sewing machine, and we'll try to capture this on video, I'm going to start just a little bit before my line, so directly on my line. And while I could stop right there, I'm just going to sew all the way off. Let me get that piece lined up a little bit better there. Got that a little bit cockeyed. We'll put another pin in that. Okay. So we'll start here, sew directly on the line, sew straight off. This is the sew, the TSP. This is the S, the sewing portion. Okay, so we've TS'd so far, and now it's time for pressing. When I'm home doing foundation paper piecing, I use my iron. I just press to the outside and give a nice press. But sometimes, maybe you're at one of our quilt retreats, which we would love to see you at, because of the shared, not everyone has an iron. Sometimes there's maybe one iron for 3 sewers. Sometimes if you're like, you know what, I don't want to get up and go kind of just keep having to do this, because there's a lot of this TSP pressing again and again and again. The Clover Roll and Press is lovely. It is a way to do a nice press without the necessary heat. Obviously, an iron is going to be a harder press, a firmer press, but this actually does a great job. And maybe for the next one, I'll go ahead and use that instead of the iron. You can just see that. So now we've TSP'd. Guess what? We just keep doing that. That's it. That's it. That's it. I wish I could tell you it's more complicated. It's not. That's what I think makes this so fun, is it actually is very easy to learn. Not intuitive at all, but very fun and easy to learn. Okay, so we knew we had C1 and C2 were neighbors. We had to have the neighbors meet, right? C2 and C3. What do we need to do? Same process. Add a 1/4 ruler. We'll fold that paper back. Give a good crease. And if I missed that crease just a little bit, I'm going to recrease that. I missed my line just a touch. Beautiful. There we go. Turn it around. Trim. Okay. Piece C3 now is next. We say, okay, we have this little skinny place, this little skinny part. Let's see if that's a good spot. Let me flip that over. Yep, I like that spot. I might go down just a little bit more, right there. Flip it over to this side. Make sure you're not pinning where you'll be sewing. So you have to kind of keep your pins back just a touch. Let's look at where we'll be sewing. So we know this is the line we're going to be sewing. So just like before, we start a few stitches before, sew directly on the line, sew straight off. Okay, this time, let's use that clover roll and press. Let's see how, maybe you're at that retreat and you're like, nope, I'm not gonna wait in line, or I don't wanna get up, it's too many steps. Does a good job, right? That's very passable. Now, when I do the iron, it's a harder press. That is my go-to. But again, if I was at a retreat and I had to wait, I would go with this because I want to be able to get going. That's why I'm at a retreat. I want to get projects finished. So now let's up here. You've done C1, C2, C3, C4. This is the same process, but let me point out, because we stitched a little bit of a distance above our line, when you go to pull this back, you're like, well, I can't pull it to the line. Yes, just tear the paper just a little bit. Remember, paper's going to be removed. So it's not different. I just wanted to point out to don't be afraid, because we did begin before the line here and here, that you'll need to tear the paper just a touch to be able to fold that back. And you don't need to be afraid to do that because, again, it's consumable. It's going to be thrown away. A nice press. So I'm just going to keep working. I'm going to stop talking. You can just follow me along as I complete this portion, and then we'll start talking about joining the sections together to complete our bunny. One thing I am going to say to you here is notice how we have piece C5 and C7. I can start a few stitches before, sew on the line, and stop a few stitches after. On these lines, because it was going off of our piece, we could just kind of go to infinity. Here, not so much. When we get to piece C5, we would start a few stitches here, sew straight off. On 6, we can come straight off the edge, sew on the line, and straight off. So I'll go ahead and and same with C7, I'll go ahead and get that finished up, and then we will trim up our section and start assembling our block. So this is what the piece looks like. And this is probably why in the very beginning when I learned foundation paper piecing, I said I have to have done that wrong. Nope, that's how it's supposed to look. Now this is where we will trim exactly on that outermost line. The more precise you cut, the better, because the pieces then just click together when you're sewing these sections. Works great with a spinning mat if you've got one. If you don't have one, it's not a problem. Just turn the shape and cut. But again, cutting exactly on that line. As tempted as you might be to remove the paper, please don't do that. I've made this mistake. Don't do this. Here's the reason why. Let's look at our pattern. These happen to be piece shape C, which is up here. Look how cute that is with that plaid. We made section B in advance because it's the same process we just did here. By keeping these things, I'm going to flip them over. By keeping the paper on, it's giving us very important information and providing guidance for our quarter and seam allowance. Isn't that awesome? So you can see it says this side joins to section C, this side joins to section B. Now we ended up making the bottom portion of the bunny, the D, the E, and the F. See, and it's always going to be, when you flip it over, see how that's the F, that's the E, and that's the D. That's why that looks like this. But when I flip this over like this, see how this says this side joins to BC. These papers, we've added so much value, so much information, and so much guidance. Don't remove them now. In fact, we sewed together our upper egg. We even included the sashing, the middle block sashing, this, and then we removed it. We want everything stabilized. Remember how much of this is on bias? Everything. By keeping the paper on, it also stabilizes everything and it doesn't get wonky. Okay, these two sections, simply placing them right side together, exactly cornered. Look at that. There's no other place for this to be. These are at very odd angles. And by cutting exactly on those lines, they're notched. That extra notching that we cut in is so that when these are placed, stacked top to bottom, they fit perfectly. Pin that in place so nothing moves. Now, when I take this, and I want to scoot that over just a touch, when I take this to the sewing machine, if these are truly stacked top to bottom and all the notching is in place, simply come right off the edge, sew directly on the line and right off the end. And I'm going to get the iron heating up to full hot, and then we'll have that B and C section joined. And we've provided you some pressing instructions here with our arrows. Look how that just comes out so beautifully. And I can see, well, that seam just kind of wants to go that direction. Look at that. That's that portion. We have learned that while we're not going to take off the paper in the main parts, taking off the paper in this seam allowance, go ahead and do that. Because when we want to join the next section, which will be the bottom portion of the bunny, why have this here? Doesn't do anything for us anymore. Keep the paper on until it's done its job for you, and then go ahead and remove that. So let me just go ahead and remove that in this seam and on this side. There's already a lot of bulk going on. So by keeping the paper in, that's not doing anything positive for us, is it? There we go. So that's That's right there. I'm going to press that back one more time where it's saying press towards C. You give another good press now that I've removed the paper. Now I see that little paper right there. This is why the other part of my go-to kit for foundation are the Gypsy Quilter tweezers. All right, give a good press. Now we had already, as I said, joined these sections. So we can see here, replacing this right side together. And I'm definitely going to sew from this side because I want to have this seam trapped, right? I wouldn't want to sew from this side because that seam might roll back. So I'm definitely going to sew from this side, sewing off the edge, straight on the line, and straight off. See how we did. That is adorable. So cute. Let's have a look here at our bunny. Absolutely adorable. And of course, our bunny has the eyes. We waited until after everything was kind of put together. Isn't that amazing? It's so fun. All right, let's give this a good press. Again, don't take the paper off. And don't sew the buttons on right now. We'll wait to the very end, as I mentioned, to attach those. The egg is done the same way, only in that there's a little process we're going to interrupt. We get it to this stage, which is so beautiful with all the, hopefully you can see that from the camera here. This is glitter. And this has the frost. This is fairy frost. This is one of our favorite basics for Michael Miller. And a fun, cute little kind of Eastery gingham here. But before you add on our next pieces, this is where we introduce this glitter rickrac. Now, there's a protective kind of clear coating that's on the top of this so that when we're laser cutting, it's not burning. So it's best to peel this from the back, and you'll just kind of have to get in there and kind of get them started because there's a lot of contact. And just gently remove that. And we can see on the back, it's kind of just in the middle of that A11 where you'll place that. And you'll want to have that go all the way to the end. And once we start adding our sides in, it'll all get into the seam allowance, kind of caught up in the seam allowance. Let me get a pressing cloth here because I also encourage you to bring your heat down to a medium. This is a more delicate product. It can be washed, but just in case, we like to bring the heat down and cover with a pressing cloth. So let me put that on the mat, get that nice and straight, and give a press. So fun. Look at that, just like that. And it's down. And I would definitely sew. You could even kind of echo that, the kind of the sine wave of that with the white, and we did the same thing, of course, down here. Isn't that so cute? Just to add even more darlingness to an already cute project. So put your rickrac on top and bottom, and then you just come back, just like you would with any other, an A13, right? Fold it back, TSP, and you just continue that process till the egg is all built out. Trim all the way around, repeat for the second egg. Then you'll have your 3 separate motifs. Remember that we cut out our sashing, and that is just where the sashing at that point is right side together. And you could either try to find the 1/4 inch seam allowance, or my personal favorite, once you get everything lined up beautifully, pin and pin, is why not just sew on this side, because I'm way better sewing on a drawn line, printed line, than I am trying to find a 1/4 inch. So that will be your sashing above and below, egg, egg, until you now have that all pressed out. And I did confirm with Tammy here that she even went as far as to put the borders on before she removed the paper, and that is also included in your pattern. So again, we really took it quite far before we started removing paper, just to keep the project stabilized. See how it's not moving? This is non-stretchable right now. You want that. The moment this paper leaves and all that bias can come into play, that's when things, if they're not already constructed, can get a little bit wonky. And I've lived that before. It wasn't a pretty sight. I struggled through it. I had basically taken all of my paper from my individual blocks and then sewn the project together. It was a little wonky and not nearly as much fun as just making sure everything is nice and stable going together. So again, once you have your 3 motifs on, you'll just add your side borders, your top and bottom border. That's when we love to be able to add our fusible fleece, our backing. Everything is going together. We use our thread we'll try to get some close-up images just to show you kind of the top quilting that we did to kind of just sew everything, hold everything together. Now, you've got your quilt sandwich, you did your quilting, the binding's not on yet. From your binding, if you are going to be doing the hanging sleeve, I want to go over that. And we've prepared our binding in advance. We love wrapping it around our fun glitter binding spools just to kind of get it ready to go. Binding has always been a chore to me, but when I get the binding prepared right at the time, I'm cutting the rest of the fabric out, wrap it in my favorite binding spool. It just makes it almost something I look forward to doing. So it's something, there's 10 colors available, and they're great for gifts, just something to mention. But before, in fact, let me go ahead. I'm going to take the project down. I want to show you the back of this project so you can see where we attach the hanging sleeve. It's very simple. You'll have a piece of your fabric you'll be using for the binding. You're going to go ahead and give that cut. And you notice it's a very short distance. From the remaining part of that strip, you can cut that down to be one of your 2 binding strips, whether you prefer 2 1/4 or 2 1/2. 2 1/2 is what we included, but 2 1/4 will certainly work. All we did was fold that inside 1/2 inch. You could use the hot ruler if you want to be very specific about that. Lay that over to your 1/2 inch mark. Press, press, sew, fold in half. But let me go ahead and bring the project down, and I can show you how that is actually put in the back. It'll be a little bit easier for you to see that. So let me grab that. I'll be right back. So here's the project. Of course, this is on the back side, and I'll just take the hanger out so it's less to look at, and you can see how the hanger easily comes out, right? Easy, easy. That's why you really only ever need to buy one of these. So how you would add a hanging sleeve to this project, and this works, by the way, on quilts too. If you're going to be entering a quilt, maybe in a juried show, they require a hanging sleeve, but you didn't add one at the time, you can always do this. Now, it's ideal to do it before you add binding. So that's how we would do this. We finished our top. Remember, we added our borders, removed the paper, added our fusible fleece or batting, added our backing, did our quilting. So imagine this as a quilt sandwich so far with no binding. And we went ahead and made our hanging sleeve. So with the top of the project here, with the raw edges, imagine the binding is not here. We place this right along the top, centered left to right, base with an 1/8 inch stitch. And actually even before that, we like to mark down about 1 3/8 inch. Put this on, sew the 1/8 of an inch, and that drawn line is up just a little bit. Notice how there's a little bit of a cave here, a little bit of a opening. That's why we drew the line 1 3/8, so that you scoot this up to that location. And you can probably see we just whip stitch that closed. Just a little whip stitch. And that's why we've got these on set here, not only for sewing on the buttons, but also doing the whip stitch on the back. Once you have that hanging sleeve in place, now you'll go ahead and bind your project. And we love to just get our binding prepared, wrapped around our favorite glitter binding spool with the 10 different colors to choose from. So it makes doing binding less of a chore. And if binding is completely new to you, be sure to check out that series. We know the longer videos like this, or we don't want to drag that out any further here, because the main thing we wanted to do is really unpack how does foundation paper piecing work? Are there tips and techniques to getting everything just dialed in so beautifully? That's really the focus of today's tutorial. And again, if binding's new, be sure to check out our binding tutorial where we give you lots of different options. You can choose your favorite method. So that's pretty much how we did our project. And then at the very, very end, we came back with needle and thread, just some black thread there, and sewed on these adorable buttons. So you can see that this is just a fun project to display, doesn't take up a great amount of space. So if you do have a work environment where you can change out the motif each month, maybe this is a great thing to put, you know, just cheering up your workspace at work, or maybe by your sewing machine, or perhaps even giving as a gift. So again, if you have been waiting to learn how to foundation paper piece, I hope you can see it's easier than you might have expected. Not intuitive at all, but easy to learn. Be sure to head to the website now to pick up your kit, your thread sets, any notions you might need, and make sure you're sharing your love of foundation paper piecing with those that still have not discovered this amazing facet of quilting. Thanks for giving me a good part of your day to show you this brand new series available exclusively from Shabby Fabrics.